Chair May, we have a recorded vote.
Mr. Benz is requesting a recorded vote. That will be postponed pursuant to our previous announcement. I believe that, let me just check my notes on the next order. I believe that brings us to Mr. Westerman. You have an amendment designated as number 7 to the ANS. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is a revised amendment. I believe it has been circulated. My amendment does several things, including it prohibits illegal immigrants from participating in the new CCC program. It ties the CCC to unemployment rates so that we aren't having the federal government competing with Main Street businesses that are desperately trying to fill jobs. It prevents the creation of a federal CCC that would compete with existing private core networks, which we know there's some very successful programs out there in the private sector that are already doing what the CCC proposes to do. And it fixes some basic drafting errors with the original text. This common sense amendment puts the appropriate sideboards on the massive new civilian climate corps that the Democrats have included in this legislation. One would think that spending $3.5 billion on anything would require a lot of time and attention, which is why it's so shocking that this section appears to be so hastily written with so few specifics. In fact, my amendment would change the name of the CCC to just the Civilian Corps. And the reason for that is because the only place the word climate appears in this title is in the header. It's just another example of Democrats slapping the word climate on something that's wholly unrelated to avoiding having to offset billions of dollars in new spending. It's unfathomable to me that at a time when businesses around the nation are still struggling to fill jobs, we would make it even more difficult for them by pumping billions of dollars into a new federal program. As Mr. Bentz mentioned earlier, I believe it was him, that the president's now talking about these being $45 an hour jobs with benefits. You may need to bump the number up. I know a lot of you all are wanting to do that, but you probably can't hire near as many people away from the private sector at $15 an hour. Turnover is such an issue that people have coined the period as the Great Resignation. According to the U.S. Department of Labor, 11.5 million people quit their jobs between April and June of this year. An additional 48% of the workforce is considering leaving their job. That's why my amendment ties CCC funding to unemployment, to ensure we're only spending money when it is truly needed. Kind of like the FDR program back in the 30s that you all are so enamored with. If unemployment is high, above 25%, then we can provide these temporary jobs to folks who are actually looking for work. However, if unemployment is low like it is now and there are private employers looking to fill jobs, we shouldn't be competing with them. That's just going to drive inflation up for everyone. Labor prices will go up, material prices will go up, and at the end of the day, the taxpayer is the one that foots the bill. As I mentioned, the CCC was originally created during the Great Depression when there were no jobs. This amendment prevents money from being spent to create new federal CCC jobs and keeps funding for the existing private, state, and tribal conservation corps that weren't in existence when the original CCC was created, but are here now. My amendment, like I said, stipulates that any participant in the CCC program must be a legal citizen. As the nation recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic and associated economic crisis, it would be entirely unfair if we spent hard-earned taxpayer funds on non-citizens who entered our country illegally. We actually have programs for migrants to come here and do work like this. It's a guest worker program that's been quite successful. So why should we create a duplicative program that's going to not hire people who are coming here legally, but could hire illegal people? My amendment also provides priority hiring preferences to our veterans. For many veterans, trauma they've experienced during their military service, both visible and invisible, does not simply go away once their military service ends. Working and creating outdoors or recreating outdoors on public lands has been found to be extremely beneficial to those returning from the ravages of war. This amendment will ensure that our veterans have opportunities to find gainful employment following their time of service in our country. Right now, they do have that opportunity because there are so many jobs available in the private sector. But if this program were only set up for when unemployment was high and there were no jobs, I think veterans should be first in line. Again, this is my amendment. I strongly encourage my colleagues to support the amendment. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Is there further discussion on Mr. Westerman's amendment? Seeing none. I'm sorry, did I miss someone?
Mr. Chair, Stauber from Minnesota.
Yeah, Mr. Stauber, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just do want to reiterate what the ranking member said. It's extremely common sense as I understand it, and I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back.
All right, I thank the gentleman. Any further discussion on this amendment? All right, I'll briefly recognize myself. This amendment came to us very late, and I will just point out that it includes some of the same poison pills that we've seen in previous amendments. It's a procedural problem for the investments that we're trying to make in the underlying legislation. It is also duplicative of a number of amendments that we have heard previously, so I urge members to vote no, yield back, and seeing no further debate, the question now is on Westerman Amendment number 7 to the ANS. I'll pause so that members in favor can unmute. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Members who are opposed will please unmute now. And all those opposed, please say no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to. Mr. Westerman, do you need a recorded vote?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I request to record a vote.
All right, that will be postponed pursuant to our previous announcement. Representative Rosendale, you have the next